Hello, members, guests, and friends. Welcome to our 2020 annual kickoff. A new year of grant making has begun. I'm Carolyn Ashburn. I'm co-president of Impact100 Philadelphia, and I'm thrilled that you could join us. Well, most of you have been on a million Zoom calls by now, so I'll keep the remarks about Zoom pretty brief. But as you can see, everybody's been muted. Your video can be on or off, although we do love to see you. And we recommend staying in speaker view during the presentations. You can place questions in the chat box at any time during the presentations, and we'll get to them at the end at the Q&A time. This program is being recorded to share with those who can't be here tonight. So I want to give you the plan for tonight. You will hear from two experienced impact leaders about diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI. And then you will hear from our two dynamic guest speakers. And then following that, we will have a presentation from our membership co-chairs for those of you interested in membership, and they will have answers to all of your questions. So we hope you will stay for that. Now, this is the time of year so important to us because this is when we ask women to join our collective giving circle. The way it works is simple. The more members we have by December 1st, the more good we can do for our community next year. We pool our money together, we work together. It's $1,150 for each, or half of that for women under 36. And together we decide where our funds will have the most impact. As many of you know, in June we gave $472,000 to the community, to 6 nonprofits that are meeting some new and urgent needs. I have never felt better about my Impact100 membership than this year because of its significance, especially this year, and that will certainly continue into the next year. I don't want to take any valuable time from the speakers. You have a real treat in store for you. So I'll refer you to our website, impact100philly.org, for more information about our grantees and about the significance of your membership. So it is now my pleasure to introduce Ellan Bernstein, a former president, co-president of Impact100. And Ellan, if you could briefly please tell us a little bit about our history and the road we've taken to launch DEI. Thanks.
Thanks, Carolyn. I also want to say how great it is to see everyone. And I'm very excited to share with you Impact's DEI journey. And that journey began in earnest in March of 2012 when a working group was convened to explore Impact's commitment to be better grant makers through DEI initiatives. We wanted to bring more varied perspectives into our organization and also to encourage young women to learn about collective giving and also to provide them with networking and leadership opportunities. Steps were taken to encourage more diversity in the age, race, ethnicity, and geographic location of our members. Some of those incremental steps included holding meetings at different locations at different times of day, implementing an installment payment plan, and intentionally reaching out to a wide range of women through information sessions throughout the Philadelphia region. Shortly thereafter, the Founders Fellows program was started to invite young and diverse women to become members of Impact. 5 fellows were selected for the first class in 2014, and the current class has grown to 15 women whom we are proud to recognize tonight. Over the last 7 years, we have had 29 young women participate in the Founders Fellows program. The perspectives, energy, and talent from these wonderful women bring to our focus area committees and other Impact committee's valuable insight. Many of the fellows have taken on leadership positions in Impact, including grant and board positions. Our most recent DEI efforts have included two important initiatives. First, in 2018, Joanne Levy, chair of the Founders Fellow Committee, and I participated in a program that was sponsored by the Philanthropy Network called the Equity Cohort Program. Leaders from 13 foundations and collective giving groups met for a year of learning about issues of equity and how the philanthropic sector can more effectively address systemic racism, implicit bias, and trust-based philanthropy. The other initiative is a standing DEI committee was formed this year with representation on the Impact Board. Given the many years that we have been striving to incorporate these initiatives into the work of Impact, and especially because of the political and social climate around racism, I am thrilled that the issues of diversity and equity are a priority of Impact. And I'm going to clap because it's really exciting that we have this standing committee. Finally, since the role of the DEI committee is to advise the board on planning and implementing DEI initiatives, I am now pleased to announce Jvawnna Bell, chair of the DEI committee. She will share with you what the committee has been working on and done over the last few months and what is in store for the future. Jvawnna?
Thank you, Ellen. So a core goal of the committee has been to explore and implement ways that we can really put DEI at the center of our organization's work. We've accomplished so much in such a short period of time. It's all been very exciting. And we just would like to share with you just some of our key 2020 initiatives that we've been able to accomplish this year. One of the things is that we were able to formalize our DEI charter as a part of the organization. We also were able to grow our committee membership, which is really exciting. We've worked in partnership with Programs Committee to plan this very event that you're attending. And we've also are going to be working on more fall education sessions around systemic racism further into the year. We also collaborated with our membership committee to update our membership form to include and collect demographic information in order to continue to measure our growth as far as diversity and inclusion is concerned. One of the things that I'm also very excited about is that we have just recently developed a DEI resource group to introduce terminology, language related to this DEI work, the history and importance of anti-racism work, and action steps that Impact100 members can take to support these efforts. The resource guide is on our website and was also shared in a previous newsletter as well. In addition to that, we have DEI discussion groups that have been recently developed that were created to provide a safe space for Impact members to learn and discuss issues regarding race and share resources to create an inclusive environment within Impact. You'll be receiving more information about the DEI discussion groups, which was in the previous newsletter, and more information will be coming forward about that as well. Now I would like to recognize our DEI committee. Next slide. We have 11 DEI committee members to date who are helping in this call to action. Their names here are on the screen, but I would just like to publicly thank them for their involvement and their efforts on this committee so far, as this work is not something that's easy, but with the help of this amazing committee and team, we've been able to make significant progress. So thank you to those who are a part of the committee and working in collaboration with us. So now I would like to transition into one of our speakers of the hour, Dr. Kevin Ahmaad Jenkins. He's a dynamic speaker. He's an author, a scholar, a lecturer at the University of Pennsylvania, and a core investigator at the Center for Health Equity Research and Promotion at the VA Medical Center in Philadelphia. Dr. Jenkins is appointed within the School of Nursing, the School of Social Policy and Practice, and as an associate fellow within the Leonard Davis Institute of Health Economics. So Dr. Jenkins is very busy. He is also the director of the Interpreting Attitudes Toward Minorities in Medicine Research Group. And in addition to that, he is a two-time award-winning national journalist who has examined the influence of race, racism, psychosocial stress within medicine, along with a number of other topics. To best understand how racism has made people sick is also another core aspect of some of the research that Dr. Jenkins is working on. His research team works with also former professional football players, veterans, and people living with vascular-based diseases to create family-centered, culturally sensitive, and competent interventions. We welcome Dr. Jenkins and invite our members to add their questions for him and for our second speaker to the chat room. He'll take some questions at the end, and then we'll also have another Q&A session later to where we can take additional questions as well. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dr. Jenkins.
Thank you so much. I hope everybody's doing well. I want to be able to share this screen. I think I'm not a host now. So as soon as I can share my screen, we'll get it done. So first and foremost, what we're going to do today is going to be, for some, a moment in time that will feel different. I don't have a lot of time with you, but I want to take you on my journey. You know, I was kind of just sitting here, and I always think about my lectures, but I also have to think about the fact that it does not miss me that as someone who, I don't know when it happened. One day I got called and somebody said, "You're an expert," and I didn't even know it. But the day that I was labeled this expert of these things, it hit me that I no longer share my story. So I want to share my story a little bit tonight. The first thing I want to tell you is that I come to you as the lottery host, the first weekend lottery host of the North Carolina Education Lottery. I come to you as someone who served as the on-field announcer for the AAA affiliate of the Tampa Bay Devil Rays, the Durham Bulls. I come to you as someone who was the public address announcer for North Carolina Central University's football, basketball, and the band. I come to you as somebody who literally left everything I knew and loved to go down and get a PhD, right? I used to go, literally, no exaggeration, I used to go to the mall and people wanted to take pictures because they saw me. It was weird. Like, I wasn't like national famous, I was like local famous. And I found myself in those moments where I'm in a gas station and somebody's buying a lottery ticket, and they look at me and they'll look at the lottery ticket, and then they'll look at me and look at the lottery ticket and be like, "Hold up, you're the lottery dude, aren't you?" You know, that was my life. And then what I realized is that I had a voice, but I didn't have a message, right? I had a voice, but I didn't have a message. I felt like I was able to operate in interracial circles fine. I went to 2 historically Black colleges, so I didn't feel as though I was missing out on my Black experience. I felt like I could get along, quote unquote, well with people who were not Black. And then life happened in America. And I remember when I was admitted into graduate school, the graduate coordinator said something to me. He said, "This is a win-win for both of us, right? Like, I want to admit you into this program. You seem like a great person to be in this program. This is a win-win for everybody." 3.5 years later, I found myself with 110 credit hours in health services, research, management, and policy at the University of Florida. I found myself in a moment where I was called into an office, and because they didn't like me, in air quotes, because they thought that I talked differently, because I did not look like everybody else. I was literally in classrooms where I'd be the only person of color in the classroom. And when it came to issues of health disparities, I was placed in the awkward position that now, as an expert in diversity, equity, and inclusion, I can say to anybody who's leading a classroom or a training or workshop or even a meeting with your teams, the worst thing you can do is make a Black person speak on behalf of the Black experience of all people, right? So that's where I found myself in some moments. I found myself where my classmates would go and have study sessions and they tell me the wrong time or they tell me the wrong location. And then I had to kind of get myself to a certain point where I was wondering, is this about race? That's the question. Is this about race? So the question I have for each of you tonight, does race matter? Does race matter? Dr. Oliver O. Forward in 1919 found himself riding home to Los Angeles on this train. And as he was on this train, someone rushed in to let him know, along with all the other passengers, they didn't know he was a physician, but someone was yelling, is there a physician? Is there a doctor on the train? Is there a doctor on the train? And they're rushing to try to figure out if they can find somebody. And Dr. Forward raises his hand and he meekly says, I'm a doctor. And they said, well, we need you in the back. So he goes to this room where he sees a little girl that's laying lifelessly on the floor of this train. And when he walked in the room, her mother was hovering over her and she was crying so hard because she was scared. She was upset. 1919. She was scared. She was upset. 1919. She was afraid that she was going to lose her daughter in that moment. So Dr. Forward literally bends down and he tries to help this little girl laying on that floor. And the mother literally saw his hand. And when she saw his hand, she noticed he had a black hand. And the first thing that she said was, my daughter is not ill enough to receive the care of a Negro. Does race matter? Dr. Forward, seemingly the only man that could have saved this young lady's life, is rejected because of race. He walks away. He sits down back in the seat that he was in, and there were a bunch of people around him as he's telling stories, because people are so fascinated by how this well-dressed black man could end up on a train and he's not carrying bags. And he's telling stories, and he literally was interrupted when they called for him. He goes to the back of the train, rejected, comes back to the front. He sits back down, he lights a cigar, crosses his legs, and goes back to telling the story like nothing happened. Does race matter? The father of this little girl now comes back to Dr. Forward, apologizing on behalf of his wife, because that father knew his little girl could be dead in the heart of a minute. Dr. Forward rejected his request. He said, no, thank you. Your wife embarrassed me. Does race matter, right? So now you know it gets serious, because he went and got his wife. Now the wife comes back with her husband to apologize to Dr. Forward, because in that moment, she allowed racism to drive a decision. Does race matter? So in this space, it became a MacGyver moment. I can say this on this call and nobody's looking at me crazy when I say that at Penn. Apparently my students have never seen MacGyver before. I feel a little dated some days when I say certain things, but in that moment, he saves this young lady's life. It becomes the great happy story that we all want to hear and all that great stuff. But in that moment, did race matter? And I always ask this question, no matter where I speak, no matter where I go, when I'm talking about this idea of race versus racism, it wasn't race that was the problem in that moment. To be honest, to that little girl laying lifelessly on that floor, race did not matter to her. And to be honest, even with that mother, after her racism showed itself, after she realized the seriousness of the moment, race didn't matter even then, because she was able to get beyond it. What we're having a discussion about is racism. And I want everybody on this call to understand something very simple. There is a strong difference between race and racism. Race in itself, my skin, is not a verb. It doesn't do anything, right? My skin is not a verb, right? And most of us try to put this idea of racism on race and not racism. So let me talk to you for a second. So in my research, what we were able to do, I'm a health researcher and I look at healthcare disparities. And one of the things we said is we believe that racism can make you sick. We also believe that the racial healthcare disparities that we see are something more than just simply the number that's presented. I think it's a narrative behind it, and particularly a structural racist kind of system that undergirds a lot of the problems that we see. But we did a simple test, and this is when I first started working at Penn with some of the students that we were working with. And I asked them, I said, do me a favor, I want you to go to PubMed, which is basically like the Google for publications and peer-reviewed research in health. Go to PubMed and I want you to do three things. I want you to first type a search in quotes that says racial health disparities and tell me what pops up. Then I want you to type in racial health disparities and prevention and tell me how many articles pop up. And then finally, I want you to type in racial health disparities and intervention and tell me what pops up. So this is what we got. The gray line represents, the darker gray represents the description, just basically saying, I'm willing to tell you about health disparities. So these are articles that literally started from 1981 to 2016. And what we've seen is the trajectory, the care, the concern, even in research, for the idea of disparities existing by race really didn't start ticking up until we get into the 2000s. Right? So we see a whole lot of articles that are willing to describe health disparities. But then you get to the light gray, which is prevention articles. So articles that tell us how to prevent racial disparities. Look at that. Then you look at articles that say how to do interventions for racial health. Look at that. We've been far more willing to explain or tell people their differences, their disparities. But it seems as though we've spent less time trying to understand how to prevent them, how to fix them, how to do something about them. And arguably, when you look at the numbers, I mean, let's be honest, like over time, what we've been seeing, and this is just in diabetes, and most people don't understand why I study health. I'll tell you in a minute. But when we look over time at just diabetes deaths stratified by race and gender, what you see in that big blue line in the back are Black men. Yes, over time, the disparity came down. The proportion of it in itself did not. The crude numbers certainly fell, but we still see a disparity. What many would argue is that structural racism, this idea of racism in itself, is what's driving a lot of these disparate outcomes. And I could talk way more about that, but I want to leave that alone for now. But racism in itself, defined by Dr. Kamara Jones, who's literally like the Beyonce for all of us academics who do this type of work. Dr. Jones said that racism in itself is a system of structuring opportunities, assigning value, watch this, based on the social interpretation of one's looks, which we call race. I purposely use this definition because I'm going to throw it on his head in a sec, and I'm going to shut up as quickly as possible so we can get you all to talking and thinking a little bit. But she said that these social interpretations of perception, how somebody looks at you, those are the things that are then used to unfairly disadvantage some individuals or communities, unfairly advantages other individuals and communities. It's that perception piece. It's not simply this idea, structuring opportunities and assigning value. It's not just simply saying, I have stuff, right? Because that's structuring opportunities and value, resources. Social interpretation, I see you, and there's something about you that says, I'm never gonna give you the stuff I have, right? Very, very simple, extremely simple concept to understand. We've spent so much time saying, oh, because I'm not racist, I don't believe in that, then it doesn't exist. And that's just formally not true. How does racism in itself work? Power, which is about resources. Perception, which is about stereotyping. Performance, which is an action. And propagation, which is how racism continues. So let's talk a little bit about that, and I'll get to the work, and then I'm gonna close out. The thing I want you to remember is when we think about the idea of power, power is a resource. Y'all are powerful people. We know that you have resources. You know that you can do things to affect folk. But what happens when you let perception dictate what you do with your power? What happens when you allow negative perceptions, these idea of racial stereotyping, saying, oh, those folks, they don't, we don't work with them, right? So if you have power and perception with no performance, that's just prejudice. That just means you don't like this group, but you haven't done anything against them. Now, when you add in the performance element, now that's getting to Dr. Jones's definition of racism. It's really saying there's a performance, there's an act that's saying I'm taking my power, using my perceptions, and I'm shaping and reshaping communities based off the fact I don't look at this group the same way as I look at myself. And it's negative, right? And when we continue to think about those things, most people say, I don't understand how racism in itself keeps going. I don't understand, like, if I'm not racist, because we only understand racism at a micro level, what some person does to another person. And we don't think about the fact that if you continually disadvantage, defund neighborhoods, if you continually treat certain educational processes when a child is simply being a child, and you tell me that this little 8-year-old, it was actually a 6-year-old down in Florida, that's handcuffed for a temper tantrum, right? And the problem here is this gets to propagation. Propagation is really about how does racism in itself survive the test of time? And it survives because, one, either people ignore power, perception, performance happening, or they support it. You either ignore it or you support it, right? And that's really the problem, is that we live in a time where there's really no consequence to doing certain things that we know disadvantages folks. I'll skip through this. But this gets to Dorothy Roberts, her definition. So what I want to do, most people don't believe me, so I'm going to show you. So look at these 3 Black girls. These 3 Black women that we see here. You know, most times when we think about race, you want to get to colorism and start talking about, oh, you know, when we talk about particularly racism, and it's like, oh my goodness, you know, people who are dark skinned versus light skinned and all this kind of stuff. No, I'm literally talking about how we use the perception of race to disadvantage people, to move resources, to do stuff we've never done before because we don't want, quote unquote, them in here, right? So these 3 women have different experiences, but they're all shrouded in this idea of the Black experience, so we think. But then I want everybody to just lean in really close to the computer screen because I'm gonna mess your minds up. The young lady that's on the right is white. She's white. Now, I met her when I was a student at the University of Florida. I know all 3 of them. And what was so funny was when I met her, I talked to her for hours. Didn't know she was white. No big deal. But I had no clue. Because when we start talking about race in itself, everybody only wants to do skin with race. There's something associated with the perceptions of racial identity and how we sound, right? There's all of these things that kind of get out there. But, you know, we want to be academic and smart and say, oh, there's no such thing. We don't do that. We're smarter than that. We will never truncate our lives down to just thinking people are ignorant because you sound, quote unquote, Black. But what we've seen is research has shown us that people who are racially ambiguous, or most importantly, people who are racially misclassified, to me, those are the people that show us the presence of racism. G.K. Butterfield is a great example, who ran the Congressional Black Caucus. He went to my alma mater of North Carolina Central University. I remember as a freshman, when they said we're gonna have this big famous Black alum of North Carolina Central to speak, and he walked in the room, and I was like, well, where's the Black dude? I was literally like, where's the Black dude? Right? This is him. This is him.
Hey, good morning.
You hear his voice.
You know, 1 second. What's happening? Can someone tell me what's happening? Wait, is this the guy?
He said he was Black. That's what he was about to say. I don't have time to let you watch the whole thing. These are his parents. He looks just like his mom, right? So now let's get to racism. All you do and hear and talk about this young man growing up in Wilson, North Carolina. His parents were activists in the civil rights movement. And he had to play and understand that game that he wasn't quote unquote Black enough, but he definitely wasn't white. And it asked me and it prodded me to say, well, maybe if we want to understand and prove the existence of racism, maybe we need to look at people who are what I call racially incongruent. Give me time to cook on this, because this is the only way this is going to work. You can't have somebody like me come in, talk for 15 minutes. Like, it doesn't work all the time, right? But in order for this to be a good primer conversation, I want you to think about something. What happens if we have white people who don't look white? Do you think their health care would be better or worse? And I literally mean it. Most people can understand Black folks who don't look Black, but our brains explode when we see white people or think about white people who don't look white, like my friend that I just showed you, right? So I did my whole dissertation on this stuff. So the first thing we did is we ran a model that looked at psychosocial stress, right? We just wanted to understand mental health. What were the outcomes for mental health amongst self-identified white people by their perceived race? So we stratified them or divided them by their perceived race. So we had white people who look white, which is the first category that you see, which is WW. We have racially incongruent white people who are perceived as Black. And then we have racially incongruent white people who are not perceived as white or Black. Why did I use that last category? I use that last category because sometimes people just think it's not looking white. But really, is it a function of not looking white or Black, right? Because sometimes it could be a function of just saying people don't perceive you as white, so they treat you better or worse or whatever. So if they think you're white, they'll treat you better. Or if they think you're Black, they're going to treat you worse. But we wanted to know, is this a function of Blackness or whiteness, or is it just kind of like otherness, right? So, oh, I'm sorry. So what we saw, and this is what this slide is showing, this is income levels. We ain't even got to the health stuff yet. So what you see on the left, on the far left, that first set of boxes under the racially congruent white folks that look white. So income, all you need to know, you don't need to know the big pieces of this, but all you need to know is that income in itself, the last bar is the highest level of income. What do you see? Right? Basically, white folks who are not perceived as white make less money, right? That's just the take-home slide from this, right? Then we ran an actual model to understand what was the risk or odds of psychosocial stress. We found that white folks who were perceived as Black had almost a 4 times higher likelihood of psychosocial stress in the 30-day period compared to their counterparts. So it's something going on, right? To a point where you don't even have to, quote unquote, be Black to be treated differently, right? We're in a space where I just want us to all remember, we have the opportunity to be the equity that's necessary. Justice Harry Blackmun said it in 1978 in the Bott case. He said that in order to get beyond racism, listen to this, we must first take account of race. There is no other way. In order to treat some persons equally, we must treat them differently. In order to treat some persons equally, we must treat them differently. We dare not let the Equal Protection Clause perpetuate racial supremacy. All this is saying is this slide. What Justice Blackmun missed, the word that he was trying to say is equity. Because equality in itself are the boxes that you see on the left. Give everybody the same and we'll figure it out. Because the goal is to see over the fence. That's what everybody knows. The goal is to see over the fence. So we'll give everybody the same amount of boxes. That's equality. But we know that really equality isn't what we need. We need equity to get over these things of the isms of our world, be it racism, sexism, homophobia, all that stuff. So here we're saying, let's give the kid 2 boxes. Let's give the woman in the middle 1 box, and the guy on the end doesn't need a box. He can see by himself. And the question that I keep coming back to when we think about racism and what it is and what it does in society, we have these conversations circularly all the time about whether racism exists or not. It does. What else do I need to tell you? Right? I'm more than happy to have the conversation about it. But my thing is, are we willing to bring the equity, the boxes that are necessary to help this thing go away? Are we willing to bring the boxes? If not, we can look at the last box, which is justice. So even though they said, hey, we don't want to give out boxes, let's just tear the fence down, but we live in America, so there's always going to be another fence, right? So that's why they put the chain link fence this time. It's a little bit better, but it's still aspirational for where we need to be and want to be. And what I'm asking is this: if we aren't bringing boxes or a bulldozer to knock that fence down, what are we really doing, right? What are we really doing? And all I'm asking you to do, I want to spend just time to ask questions or whatever you all want to do with this. But the thing I want you to always remember is, like, when we talk about racism as a social construct and all this kind of stuff, sounds good, but really we're talking about humanity. We're talking about the fact that, can you treat somebody the right way? Can we get over this lunchroom, elementary school mentality? You can't sit with me because you're different, because we've allowed difference to become deficient. We've allowed the fact that because I look the way I do, if I don't have this on and I look a certain way, I got the cops called on me. I've had the police called on me at Penn. I've had the police called on me at the University of Florida. I know what it's like. I understand these issues. But the question is, can we either bring equity or justice to these moments? Because there's too many people telling you that racism exists, and I don't understand why I have to do a whole lecture to explain that. I would rather have a conversation to explain it. So with that said, I just want you all to just know, thank you. I appreciate it. Again, I'm trying to work around my time a little bit, and I'll just end on this slide. The only thing I want you to know is this: every minute of every single day, there are 65 some odd, almost 70 or 66,000 posts that happen on Instagram. 450,000 tweets go up every 60 seconds. 3 million posts happen on Facebook every 60 seconds. Over 500 hours of content is uploaded to YouTube every minute. Check this last one out. 3.39 billion people access the internet every minute of every day. We have all this access to information, but yet one of the oldest, most historic problems, and not just our country, but our world, is still misunderstood. We need conversation. We don't need any more lectures. We don't need anybody else sitting there trying to tell us what it is or what it isn't. We need to have a conversation. And that's what I'm here for. And I'm hoping if you have questions, I'm happy to get us started. And most importantly, I want you to understand that in order for us to be here and for you to hear from me, I had to deal with a whole lot of stuff. And I'm very appreciative of your time. I'm very thankful of your time to do this point today. But I want you to know that in your minute that you use next, who will you help? Will you bring equity? Will you bring justice? Thank you all.
Great. Thank you so much, Kevin. That was amazing. Just in the interest of time, we're going to have everyone continue to post your questions into the chat, and we're going to have to do it during the open Q&A after our next speaker finishes. I hope that's okay for everyone. So again, thank you, Kevin, so much for sharing your research and your words with us. Now we're going to move on to our next speaker, who is Nelly Jimenez from the organization ACLAMO. She is the executive director and CEO of ACLAMO, the Latin American Community Action of Montgomery County. ACLAMO is a 2020 100,000K grant recipient. They are based in Norristown and Pottstown. It's a nonprofit whose mission is to provide educational programs and social services, along with access to health and wellness programs to the Latino communities within the Montgomery County. In addition, they are aimed at empowering them to reach their full potential through this work. ACLAMO serves as a full-service organization and provides a safe haven for the Spanish-speaking population in Montgomery County. Nelly, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. Thank you so much for being here with us, and I'll let you take the floor.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. Jenkins. That was amazing. Next time I'll go first, okay? You're very good. Now I have to step it up. Okay, so hi, everybody. Good evening. Thank you so much for having me tonight and for the support you have provided our organization, ACLAMO. When the pandemic erupted back in March, we all changed into an emergency mode. First things we thought, people are going to be very scared, including our staff and the people we serve. So we turned our chalk into action. We recorded a video in Spanish informing our community members of what was happening, why we were closing our building, and how to reach out to us through this crisis. But the most important message we really wanted it to deliver is that we wanted it to make sure to promise them that they were not to be left alone through this, that we were going to stay with them through this crisis. You see, our clients felt that people were running in different directions, but they were standing still in the middle with no information or with information they couldn't understand. The service changed, we adapt, we modify services, change our programs. We became more flexible than ever, we adapted, but our commitment to our community was there, has always been there, and will always be there. Once the virus started spreading, we knew right away how the virus was going to impact our community. How the same issues we have been trying to address for years were going to increase and directly and negatively affect the health and well-being of those we serve. We knew the response to the virus, outreach, and then recovery strategies were not designed or weren't going to be designed to include our most vulnerable community members. We were worried because we knew how the crisis was going to underline the structural inequalities that have been there all along. The virus is new, but not the structures and systems that were developed to exclude people in our communities. We knew it was going to be a recipe for disaster. Perhaps we decided that we knew better, that there was no urgency and that we were going to be able to make changes even knowing that the system was created to keep some communities down. Maybe we looked the other way. Maybe we were not bold enough. When you live in an impoverished community, no one is safe, and no one was safe when the pandemic hit. The number of people who were infected week after week increased dramatically. Testing wasn't offered in local communities. Registering people to testing sites was difficult. Transportation was a huge barrier. And healthcare was not easily accessible unless you ended up in the emergency room. Norristown is considered a food desert. You know Norristown, where our main office is. Finding affordable, healthy food and product is almost impossible. Most of the people in town earns minimum wage. Many have pre-existing health conditions. Yes, it is a recipe for disaster. When many people in the community are essential workers and got exposed to the virus and brought it home, when they didn't always have access to PPE or personal protective equipment, yes, it is a recipe for disaster. When many people don't have access to preventive healthcare visits because they do not have insurance or they are underinsured, yes, it is a recipe for disaster. When the majority of them can no work from home, don't own a computer, and or didn't have internet at home. When our children, Black and brown in our community, didn't have access to Chromebooks since March 12 until the end of the school year, it is a recipe for disaster. When we know the community is experiencing adverse health outcomes and their life expectancy is lower than other communities, it is a recipe for disaster. So when people talk to me about we are in this boat together, I want you to stop and reflect on that. Are we really all in this boat together? The pandemic has touched and affected all of us, one way or the other, me included, but we are not in the same boat. The storm has affected everybody, but the perfect storm really happened in communities that were already vulnerable before the pandemic hit. Now, we couldn't have predicted a pandemic. Perhaps we should have planned better. That's another political that I'm not gonna go there. But we knew these communities were already in trouble. Today we need to move forward, but we can never forget the past that brought us here. And we can never go back. The idea of going back to normal should check you and everyone around this room to the core. We are better than this. We need to do better. We want to encourage individual responsibility while embracing social responsibility that provides individuals with opportunities, resources, and fair investments. We need to meet them where they are and provide them what they need so they can be the best they can. The reality is that we are not going to be well if we all know well. So what do? We need to improve, change, modify, eliminate systems that were created to hold and keep people down, to keep people in poverty, to prevent whole communities to access basic needs, and that are not allowing them to build and accumulate wealth. We need to be uncomfortable and ready to have hard conversations about race, social justice, and wealth. And I agree on that with Dr. Jenkins. We have to become a little bit more uncomfortable. We want everybody to be well. This is not about taking, it's about balance. We should take a deep look into our healthcare system, increase targeted outreach, improve communication strategies, and data collection systems, especially by race and ethnicity. We need to follow the data with resources and money. For me, plans with no capital investments is an empty promise. We need to incorporate an equitable response and recovery strategies to serve our most vulnerable population, and we need to create access to healthcare services for all. I'm sorry, we cannot go back to normal. It is not in our best interest, the best interest of our community members, our people, our children, your children, my children, and as a human beings. My call to action today is, what will you change in your life to be part of that change? What will you do next? Change is hard. When I started this talk, I told you that we have promised our community not to leave them alone, that we were going to be there all step of the way, and we have. Our staff has worked non-stop since that day, March 12th. We have adapted, go virtual, learn, fall, stand up, cry, smile, sweat, scream. But most importantly, we have hope for the future. We know we can do better. We have used different technology platforms. We have distributed and delivered food to children, families, and seniors. We have provided social services and, most important, emotional support. During the last 6 weeks, we have distributed 12,370 meals to children. 705 families received product bags of healthy food. 5,812 meals were provided, and we delivered 59 boxes to our seniors. We have disbursed more than $43,000 in rental utilities and COVID emergency fund for assistance to the families that have been more impacted by the virus and have lost their family members through this crisis. We also have provided virtual summer classes for 106 children and their parents. We have offered information and education through our Facebook Live account that have reached more than 10,000 people in our community and the surrounding areas. Our promise still stands today, and it will still stand tomorrow. My ask to you, what would you do differently to contribute to make our country, our communities, a safer and better place for everyone? It's up to you, it's up to all of us. What will you do next? Thanks for listening, for your willingness to seek change, for becoming an active player. We will all be better because of it. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Nelly. That was fantastic. Good evening. I'm Suzan Willcox. I am the co-president of Impact100. Thank you to Nelly and Kevin. Wow, your remarks were inspiring and challenging, and we appreciate your taking the time to share your stories, your insights, and your wisdom. And thank you also to Ellan and Jvawnna, your remarks about DEI. This work is challenging, it's inspiring, and it's really relevant to Impact100 and the Philadelphia nonprofit community, which continues to face and address urgent and unique challenges, especially during this pandemic. I know you have questions for our speakers. Hold on to them. We're going to post them in chat. We'll get to as many as we can. But before we open up the Q&A, I want to introduce you to Isabel Clark. Isabel is a former Founders Fellow, and she's been on Impact's board for 2 years now. Initially, she worked with the Young Philanthropist, and she is one. And now she serves as co-chair of the membership committee, along with Ellen Gilbert, who you will meet later. Isabel?
Thank you, Suzanne. Our members make the case for joining Impact100 far better than I can. Thanks to Founders Fellow Lizzie Lee, we have this short video to share with you of members speaking about their experience.
Collaboration, respect, compassion, and passion.
First word is amazing. It's amazing. Sisterhood, like true sisterhood and support, care.
I happened to sit next to someone who was a member, and actually a fairly new member and very enthusiastic about it. And she told me about it, and we went to one of the intro meetings together, and it was, right up my alley, and has proven to be, I have to say, even more so than what I expected. I just find the process so well thought out. It's one of the best organizations that I've ever belonged to.
I think what was really powerful is the idea of everyone coming together and giving a substantial gift that could really shift the trajectory of a nonprofit in a way that my $25 will never be able to do. So I started as a Founders Fellow, and now I'm a young philanthropist who's a board member, and I'm excited to become a general member when I age out of this.
Group decision-making often ends in a better decision than if something I had to do and decide all on my own, because when you share perspectives with other people, you get information you might not have uncovered.
The process, especially for probably any new members, might feel a little daunting, or it's something you don't know about because you're new to grant making, but the leadership and just the women in Impact in general always do a great job of making you feel comfortable and welcome and feel like you probably think you don't know, but that's okay because we're all doing this together anyways.
I also feel like because we were stay at home, it was even more meaningful to be a part of Impact this year, because you clearly were in a position where you were doing something, and it felt very, very good to be able to do that this year.
While we hope to see a brighter tomorrow, our current struggles with COVID-19 and inequity will continue to be felt well into the future. This coming year, local nonprofits will need the support of Impact100 more than ever. Renewing your membership is one way you can help our community in this time of crisis. The more members we have, the more funding Impact100 can provide for the organizations doing critical work in the greater Philadelphia region. I'd like to extend a big thank you to those of our 451 members from 2020 who have already renewed for 2021. We invite all who haven't renewed yet to do so tonight. If you're listening and are not yet a member of Impact100, we'd love to have you join us in collective giving. We'll be holding a brief info session at the end of the program for anyone interested in learning more about membership and what that entails. We'd love to have any of you or other women you know join us to fund the grants for 2021. To gauge the level of interest in the audience, we're launching a quick poll now. Please let us know how you feel. A reminder that the deadline to renew is December 1st, but Ellen and I wouldn't hate it if you renewed a little bit earlier. Please go to the Impact100 Philadelphia homepage to join. We'll put a link to our website in the chat box here.
Thank you, Isabel. That was terrific. And December 1st is a very important date. We only have a few minutes for chat, for questions from your chat, but let's start with a question for Nelly, Mrs. Jimenez. First of all, so proud that Impact is supporting ACLAMO. Your passion is really inspiring. Can you maybe share with us a little bit more, an example or an anecdote of ACLAMO making a difference in the life of one of your clients in this really challenging time?
Sure. So we have many stories, but I think we had a family in a mom and a dad. The dad got very sick with COVID. He ended up in the hospital in Einstein. He was the sole provider because the mom was always at home taking care of the kids. And he got sick and he was in the hospital for a month and a half. Now, because he didn't speak English, we had to call the nurses every night to check in on him because the wife, you know, the family is not allowed to go to the hospital if you have COVID-19. So we had to call every night, Saturdays, Sundays, and check in. In the meantime, we also help the family, providing them with food, and then they were behind rent and utilities. So we were able to help them to apply for rental and utility assistance. And we were also able to have the kids in our summer program and then in our after school program. And the father was able to be out of the hospital, and he was in oxygen even after he left the hospital for like about a month, and now he's starting to work again. So we've been providing case management and support through all this time. And we have about 5, 6 moms that lost their husbands to COVID, and now they're single mothers. And 4 of them depending on their husband because they were taking care of the babies. So we've been helping them through the pandemic, not only to deal with the emotional, you know, the emotional part of it of losing their husbands, but their fathers, you know, the father of the kids. So it's been emotional for them. It's been emotional for the staff. But if we weren't there, these families wouldn't have had the support, and many of them would have ended up in the streets.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really compelling. Kevin, you have a position at the nursing school. Do you find that issues of racial health disparities are included in the curriculum? Is there any pushback? Is there resistance? What kind of responses within the learning community is there to the really important issues that you raised?
Well, I mean, you know, we've all been trying to remediate our curriculum. So let's be honest, like at the end of the day, curriculums just don't reflect the idea of racism. 3 months before the pandemic started, I was literally working on a grant and told, you won't get funded if you say racism. So take it out and use something else. Today, I can say racism. Today, I do 2 of these a week. And Joanne Levy knows, she knows my struggle. I've been talking the same way I talk since 2015 when I hit the campus of the University of Pennsylvania. It's gotten me in trouble, right? Like I get hate mail, I get death threats, I get, you know, all of these different things. But when you talk about classrooms, the thing I want everybody to understand, nobody's calling anybody a racist. All we're really trying to do is have a conversation about racism, right? And I sit in a classroom. I've taught in nursing for 5 or 4 years. It took about 3 years before I saw my first Black male student, right? Imagine walking into a classroom of 50 people and you're the only Black man in the class, right? So, and we know the dynamics in nursing. Men don't, you know, professors in nursing that are men, it doesn't happen a lot. But as we're working, what we're working toward is to expose people to this idea that you don't have to keep reading the same pathologizing literature that suggests only that underrepresented minority patients are sicker, therefore you need to do all of these different things. They don't treat people like humans. So if you think you heuristically know how to treat somebody based off some article you read, and you never even had a conversation with people that are not like you, like that's what my job is. So in nursing, we're doing that. We're doing it in the School of Social Policy and Practice in Annenberg, you know, in the School of Medicine even. I mean, it's gotten better, but it's been difficult.
So we're almost out of time, and this is probably unfair to make you respond briefly, but maybe one last question to Kevin is, you know, other than voting for people who will pass laws and policies to address racism in our systems, what can we as individuals do, as philanthropists, as supporters, as allies?
The big thing that's most important is, remember that slide I showed you. I was trying to kind of do like the quickest.
The one with the fences? The one with the fence? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I was pulling it up as I was talking. But I'm actually going to show everybody this one because I think what's most important for everybody to remember is the idea of doing equity is something that's not daunting as you think. Joanne Levy was my equity, right? There were some days I just needed somebody to actually acknowledge my presence as a person, right? And I can't blame it on Penn, right? I don't want to make it seem like Penn is like this racist place. It's not racist necessarily. It's just, you know, people close their doors at Penn and get to work. These are the smartest people in the world. They just kind of close the door and get to work. But there's something interesting that happens between the hours of maybe 7:30 and 9:30. And what that is when we all are coming to work. There's a good morning for some and there's not for some. There's a let me hold the elevator for you while you watch it close. Ellen DeGeneres has a joke about it. You know, like I tried the best I could. There's equity also in involvement of teams. You work with people who you never talk to. You know what I'm saying? So when we talk about equity, before I get to the big stuff of spending money, like there are just little things we can do to bring equity. Sometimes people don't realize how big the box of being kind can be. Just being kind to people, you know? So some of the things that we talk about and we push is about, you know, being a voice, being able to really get out there and support pipeline projects for underrepresented minority students, for underrepresented minority professionals, so that we can get pipelines in play. My wife is in medical device and ortho at Johnson & Johnson. She's young, a Black woman in orthopedics. She's gone to conferences where literally there was no other Black woman at the conference, like period. You know what I mean? So we have to have these conversations. Let's be the equity, support those pipelines. If you believe in trying to help, then let's help by using the pivots of access. If you can expand access, that is how you can dismantle racism. Racism in itself has been about denial over the years. It's been about saying, you can't come here, you can't do this. And the evolution, we have to see racism as a social innovation. And it has innovated with time, just the same way our cell phones have gotten smaller. That's the racism in itself has gotten more subtle. And what I'm asking each one of you to do is pay attention. If somebody comes to you and says, look, I'm going through X, Y, and Z, I'm not asking you to understand it, just listen, right? Sometimes people just need to hear from you. When it comes to an organization like this, you can expand access for people. You can help people get more access to care and the testing stuff. And I can't, Nelly, I hope we can link afterwards because I want to talk to you about, I'm working with the city on the COVID-19 outreach for the Black and Brown communities. You know what I mean? Like this just happened like all of a few weeks ago. So we got a lot of stuff going on, but if you want to bring equity, I don't want to create equity as some, or excuse me, how to help, if you will, as some big list. I'm really talking about humanity. That's literally what I'm talking about.
Thank you, Kevin. That's really helpful to think about the small things as well as the big things for equity. You know, sometimes small steps lead to bigger ones. So that was very helpful. We are out of time for our principal program, but before we go, I want to just let you know about some upcoming events this fall. Jvawnna told you about the DEI discussion groups. There will be 3. The size will be limited. Each will meet 3 times beginning next month. So we'll be sending out details to all Impact members next week. So be on the lookout for that, how to register, how to participate if you're interested, and we hope you are. We also have 2 upcoming educational programs, really terrific ones featuring recent grantees. On October 8th, we will hear from Maria Macaluso, who's the Executive Director of the Women's Center of Montgomery County. They focus on domestic violence, certainly an issue during this pandemic. And the Women's Center received just this past June $100,000 from Impact. And then on November 10th, we'll learn more about the work of the Youth Sentencing Reentry Project, a 2019 grantee, also for $100,000. And they will talk about the criminal justice system. So information about these 2 opportunities will also be included in next week's member email. So look out for those. And then finally, I want to remind you, December 1st, as Isabel mentioned, is very important. This is the membership deadline for upcoming grant year. This determines the pool of funds that we will have going forward. So sign up. And of course, there's no need to wait till December 1st to join or renew. Thank you all so much for participating tonight. I also want to extend a personal thank you and a thank you on behalf of the Impact members here to Nancy Gottlieb and E. Prensky Rowe. They organized this session. They've become expert in virtual meetings, and we so appreciate their hard work and their skill. So now, please turn on your video if you haven't already. You can change it out of speaker view if you like, so that we can see all your faces. We invite prospective members or others interested in learning about Impact to remain on the call for a brief information session hosted by membership chairs, Isabel Clark and Ellen Gilbert. To the rest of you, before you click on the Leave Meeting button on your screen, we're going to unmute everyone for a round of applause for all of our speakers. Thank you all. Thank you all.
Nice job.
Stay tuned for stay tuned for Isabel. And
Thank you.
let's look at all these great faces. And good night. And now Isabel.
Thank you. So anyone who's staying on is here for the information session. If you're not, this is your time to say goodbye. So we'll let you go if you're not. If you're here to stay, that's wonderful. Give everyone just few more seconds here to click leave if they're not, and if not, we'll get started. Perfect. All right, I think that's probably everyone, right? Yeah. A lot of board members, which is good. Hopefully you guys have already renewed everyone. I'm just saying. All right. Yeah, good job. Great. So hi, everyone. I'm Isabel Clark. I'm one of the membership co-chairs here. We're only going to take about 10 minutes because I know we ran a little long on the program and it's 8:15 on Thursday, so I don't want to keep you too long. We just want to give you a brief overview of what membership is for Impact 100, what we do, and share information about becoming a member. So I'll start with a very brief overview of Impact 100. It was founded in 2009, and we now have 451 members and have made 55 grants totaling over $3.6 million. This past year, we made grants of $472,000 to 6 grant recipients who applied for the 5 counties in the Philadelphia area. Our mission is to provide high-impact grants in the Philadelphia region that reach underserved populations, highlight unmet needs, and raise the profile of lesser-known organizations. Our goal is simple. It's to grow our membership. More members means more funding for important needs in the region. We welcome all people who identify as women 21 and over. We seek and value diversity in age, race, experience. A more diverse membership makes us better as both a membership and a grant maker. We also have a young philanthropist program, age 21 to 35, and a Founders Fellow program, which you can learn more about on our website. I'll leave the rest to Ellen. I've talked a lot today, so I'll leave it to turn it over to my co-chair, Ellen Gilbert.
Hello, everyone. So the obvious question is why join? And that's what we're here tonight. We'd love to have all of you join us. So Impact100 is a women's collective giving organization. We pool each member's contribution into large collective grants of $100,000 or more, which you heard about tonight. Our grant finalists are determined by members who choose to be part of the proposal review process, and our grant recipients are determined by a vote of the entire membership. By donating and being part of our grants, you're doing something really important in our region, and we know that your funds will really make a difference. Each individual member leverages the time and effort of hundreds of women in our organization who volunteered to review and carefully evaluate the proposals for our organization. So I want to just take a moment and tell you a little bit about what involvement can look like, because it can look different based on your time and your interest. About half of our members choose to just donate. They do not attend programs, they don't participate in proposal reviews, they just donate, and we are thrilled with that. The other half of our members choose to engage a little bit more. They attend programs, and they might also serve on some of our focus area committee groups, and I'll talk about that in a moment. As Isabel said, we do have membership open to women 21 and over, and you can see, I think Carolyn mentioned that it costs $1,150 to join. Of that, $1,000 goes right into the grants pool. For women 35 and under, they become what we call young philanthropists. They're learning about philanthropy from the rest of the group, and they can join at $575, of which $500 is dedicated to the grants pool. That's Isabel. So you keep hearing about December 1. December 1 is the important date because that's the date you have to join by in order to participate in the grants that we're going to give out in June of 2021. So grants. Grants are at the heart of what we do. As I said, about 220 members participate each year on what we call our focus area committees. And there are 5 focus area committees: arts and culture, education, environment, family, and health and wellness. This past year, for example, we received 205 letters of inquiry. This is whittled down to about 70 proposals. We then did 36 in-depth reviews, and I mean in-depth reviews. They are very thorough reviews. And we finally got that down to 6 finalists. The commitment that these people make to be part of an FAC is they meet 3 times as a group, plus everyone is invited to come to the annual meeting in June. And that's open to everyone, whether you're on a focus area committee or not. Our process is very thorough, as I said. There are also people who have a financial interest, and they can be engaged in this process as well. We have a financial group that reviews all the proposals and shares their findings with the FACs. The FAC members find that it's a very rewarding experience. I've done it for 2 years, and I can vouch for that. It's just a terrific experience to be on an FAC. Plus, it's a great way to meet other people. All members can enjoy hearing our grant recipients talk about what they've accomplished with our grants, like you heard from Nelly tonight. But you can also hear about what happens with our grants in newsletters and at our annual meeting. The only other thing I want to mention is that in addition to the grants process, we also sponsor fall and spring education programs like the one you heard tonight. And we do our annual kickoff in September. We do a funding celebration in December and an annual meeting in June. So that's sort of what our annual calendar looks like, to give you an idea of the time commitment. So if there's any questions at all right now, we could answer those. I don't know, Isabel, did anything come up in the chat?
Just some high praise from Suzan Willcox, which we'll take. But
Okay. Well, if there are any questions, we just want to let you know that you can reach us at members@impact100philly.org. Isabel and I are happy to answer any questions. And if you don't want to write that down, it's on our website. So if you go to our website, impact100philly.org, for more information. There's lots of good information there. Plus, that's also how you can join. So you can join from our website, or you can download the form from the website and send in a check that way. So in summary, Isabel and I want to thank you for joining us tonight for the annual kickoff, and specifically for staying on for this info session. We really hope that you'll become members, and we look forward to having you join us in this important work. Thanks, and have a wonderful night, what's left of it. Good night, everybody.